Hello there. In today's tasting I want to take a look at a wine that has a famous old name from South Australia's Barossa Valley. So this is Orlando's 2015 Centenary Hill Barossa Valley Shiraz. Now Orlando, as I say, a historic old name from the Barossa Valley, has an establishment date of 1874 because that was the date when Johann Gramp was given the Orlando vineyard in Rowland Flats by his father as a wedding present. However, the Gramp family had actually been in the Barossa Valley since they'd arrived in 1847, presumably as one of the number of Silesian families that settled this part of South Australia. Arriving in 1847, Johann Gramp immediately set about planting a vineyard next to a little stream that had just been named Jacob's Creek. His vines flourished, and in 1850 he released his first wine, which was described as a hock. It was a barrel-aged white wine and evidently proved very popular. In the mid-1900s, Orlando and the Gramp family were some of the most innovative wine producers in South Australia. In the early 1950s they were pioneers of the idea of cool fermenting Riesling and had an instant success with that. In 1956 they'd imported the equipment necessary to tank ferment sparkling wine, and they were the first people to produce and bottle tank fermented sparkling wine in Australia, and their Barossa Pearl brand became very successful. In 1962 they established the Steingarten vineyard and started producing cool climate Eden Valley Riesling that was hugely successful. By 1971, however, the family had overextended themselves financially, and a group called Reckitt Colman made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and they sold the company. In 1976, Reckitt Colman established a brand that we've all come to know, Jacob's Creek, arguably one of the most successful Australian wine brands. However, in 1988, a group of 4 former Orlando directors purchased the company back from Reckitt Colman with a certain amount of government assistance and support. They actually went on very quickly a year later in 1989 to sell the company on to a foreign group, to Pernod Ricard, with the idea that Pernod Ricard had the international distribution that was necessary to help a large brand to prosper. And indeed that's what Jacob's Creek did under their auspices, and what happened was that actually Jacob's Creek became the driving brand, and Orlando was more or less put into abeyance. Thus it wasn't until 2020 that the Orlando brand was re-established. However, recently Pernod Ricard have sold a lot of their wine assets to Accolade, so included in that deal was Jacob's Creek, was Orlando, were a number of other Australian, New Zealand and Spanish wine brands. Centenary Hill is aiming to be a typical southern Barossa Valley Shiraz. It's sourced from low-yielding blocks of old vines. They refer to them on the label here as heritage vines. I'm assuming these are dry-farmed old bush vine Shiraz, with the old vines producing dense, concentrated fruit thanks to the low yields that their age encourages. In 2015, a wet winter gave the soil good reserves of water. A warmer than average spring pushed the vegetative cycle ahead of normal, although there were some problems with some spring frosts which cut yields in some blocks. A cool January brought a little relieving rain to the vineyards, and the cool conditions enabled the flavour ripeness to catch up with the sugar ripeness in the berries. February was dry and had cool nights, so the dry conditions ensured there was no disease pressure, and the cool nights ensured good acid retention and the ability to harvest balanced fruit. Picking for this wine started on the 18th of February and went through until the 3rd of March, and what resulted was an excellent Barossa vintage. The fruit from 4 separate parcels for this wine was hand-picked, and fermentation took place in small open fermenters, with a number of closed static fermenters being used as well. 2 of the 4 parcels were crushed, destemmed and fermented as normal. The remaining 2 retained a portion of stems in the ferment. The different parcels spent different times on skins. Those parcels that had been crushed and destemmed spent 2 weeks macerating, but to avoid too much tannic extraction from the stems, the parcels that retained whole bunch only macerated for 11 days. And this gave some contrasting parcels. The fruit that had had some whole bunch retained in it had bright, fresh fruit, while the fruit that had been crushed and destemmed was darker with more brooding flavours. The wine then aged for 18 months in oak. The oak used was predominantly French oak hogsheads, some of which were new, most of which were seasoned. But there was also a proportion of new American oak hogsheads being used. Now, a hogshead is a 250 litre barrel, so just slightly larger than a barrique. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Starting off, we've got a lovely, deep, dark colour. That's practically opaque. If I look really carefully, I can just about make out the stem of the glass as I look down through it, but only just. It's holding its colour very well to the rim. There is a slight red purple at that rim, but you know, for the majority, that's quite a dark, almost black ruby. The wine has 14.5% alcohol and is throwing generous tears onto the side of the glass there. Swilling it, let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? I mean, it has some really classic aromas of Australian Shiraz. There's dark fruit overlaid with leathery notes. But there's also quite a noticeable eucalyptus top note over the top of it all, sort of slightly minty, very distinctive. In combination with the ripe red fruit, quite an attractive aroma. I suppose in there as well you've got a little bit of sort of cedar and quite a bit of sort of plush vanilla. There are chocolatey notes. It's a powerful and really quite opulent aroma. So let's have a taste. The wine is rich. Quite heady with warm alcohol, quite plentiful notes of cedar and vanilla, which are intermingled with these sort of quite savoury, leathery notes on the mid-palate. I'm not sure that sounds quite as attractive as it is actually. There are elements of almost sort of chocolatey texture, there's vanilla in there. I guess there are spicy high notes, cinnamon, nutmeg, things like that just at the back there. Possibly touches of pepper, but actually the sort of the more sweet spices are more to the fore. There is quite a dense black fruit. There's boysenberry, there's hints of dark plum, there's hints of dark cherry. And there's a very fine, smooth tannic structure running across the middle of my tongue. The tannins have an almost sort of chocolatey smooth nature. I should imagine the wine's probably undergone its malolactic conversion in the barrel, and that helps to marry elements of the oak with the tannin and stop them from being too astringent, along with the richness and the ripeness of the fruit. The wine's concentrated, it's dense. I suspect in a couple of years it will open out a bit more and start to show a bit more sort of black to red fruit. Currently it's got quite a brooding dark fruit core. The flavours are lasting quite well, but it's a sort of a dense black plum flavour at the finish. The acidity is enough to make the fruit juicy and fresh, but I wouldn't say it was particularly high acidity. And although the alcohol is giving warmth, that is actually running alongside some lovely rich fruits, so it's not standing out and it's not overpowering it at the finish. So the producer suggests that this is a wine that could be aged for up to 20 years. And I do think it's a wine that would benefit from being in the cellar for 5 years, possibly 10 years. And I'd be really interested to see how it develops, because I'm sure it'll gain more of the savoury notes, but I'm also sure that some of the brighter, more red fruit perfumes will start to come out of the Shiraz as well. The Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this vintage of this wine is 89 out of 100. I think in its current state that is a completely fair score. There's a possibility that it may develop to exceed that. Certainly I think there's sufficient weight of fruit, and I think the elements here are in balance with one another. It's not a delicate, elegant wine, but I think it is showing the power and the richness that you get from old vine fruit from the Barossa Valley. I think it's an interesting wine. I'd love to revisit it at a later stage. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you found the video of interest. If you've enjoyed it, we'd be very grateful if you'd press the like button down below. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box. We'd love to hear what you think about these wines, what you think about the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to them. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, it would be fantastic if you'd consider subscribing to our channel. We'd appreciate your support, and that way also you could set yourself an alert and you'd be notified every time we publish a new tasting. I will leave a link in the notes below to the page for this wine on the Wine Searcher website, so you can follow that and you can find out more about where it's available near you, what its pricing is, and using the tabs on that page you can find all sorts of background information about the region, the producer, the grape variety, any winemaking notes we've got, the price history, what the critics have said about it, any awards it's won. You can see what other users have thought about it, and you can look at the performance of the various vintages against each other. So hopefully we've managed to assemble on those pages most of the information anybody could possibly want if they're wanting to make an informed buying decision for this wine. So thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you'll make some time and come and join us again for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.